DePelisi here with the Broward County Crime Commission at our 5th Annual Narcotics Conference. I'm with Mr. Dale Quigley, Deputy Coordinator for the National Marijuana Initiative. Dale, I just wanted to thank you for coming, first of all.
My pleasure.
You're such an expert in the content and dialogue in which you speak. What was your feeling about how the audience resonated to your information today?
I was struck by the fact that even though there's been a constant dialogue about marijuana in the state of Florida, there seems to be an actual lack of understanding of what the causes and effects are. And that was really the whole purpose of doing this today, is that this was more of a predictive analysis tool. Let's take a look what's going on in other states, because if it's happening there, it can be anticipated happening here. So that's why I think there was such an excellent response back from folks about looking at information about public health and public safety, about what's going on the medicine side of it, what's going on with treatment, what's going on with therapy. The information that we're dealing with today is so much different than the research that was provided in years past. And that, a lot of it is driven by the potency. And that was one of the areas that I had several sidebar conversations that wanted to know more about the potency levels.
What was so interesting about your content and dialogue was the fact that you spoke about, I used the three letters A, B, and C on how basically medical marijuana was letter B before they could get to C for recreational marijuana in Colorado. And now medical marijuana is like a very low statistic in terms of usage in Colorado. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I think that really hits home of where Florida may be heading as well.
Sure. I mean, if you look at the timeline that we went through in Colorado, we legalized for medical purposes in 2000. And that was our first amendment to our Constitution, where it's qualified medical patients. It was all about patient care. We had sick, debilitating folks that needed their medicine. And it's been interesting to watch over the course of 12 years when we went to a recreational legalization that now all the dialogue that you hear no longer involves patients. It's no longer about patients needing medicine. You look at the revenue that's generated from sales, and it's all on the retail side. You hear very little dialogue about patient care anymore. So it goes back to a statement that was made years ago about using marijuana in a medical environment as a red herring to give it a good name. And once you go through decriminalization, once you get for a medical model that's approved by a state, we're seeing consistently across the country that as soon as it's approved medically, recreational follows, usually within a year or two after it goes through medical.
So now we fast forward ahead into recreational usage of marijuana. You provided excellent data about traffic accidents, fatalities, driving under the influence statistics, how things have pretty much ratcheted up in Colorado, and emergency room visits. Right. Emergency room visits was a case slide on that. I mean, can you touch on that a little bit?
When we talk about traffic safety, and especially the relationship with accidents, and specifically fatal accidents, the first caveat you have to put in this conversation for clarity is we're not saying that marijuana has caused each and every one of these accidents.
Right.
It has become a contributing factor that has to be taken into consideration, though.
Right.
The same as distracted driving, same as texting and driving. It's just adding one more problem to the equation. So when we legalized in 2012 for recreational purposes, we did see an increase in our fatalities that, upon testing during postmortem, the driver of the fatality is coming back positive for THC. Now, there's other drugs involved in some of these cases, but THC is becoming a very prevalent condition, test result, that you have to start looking at, is there a cause and relationship here? You know, we've got studies that have come out about accident rates, just simple fender bender type of accidents. And they looked at marijuana states and compared those to the non-marijuana states as immediate neighbor. And they found that, like in the state of Colorado, our accident rate, just for accident rates, is about 14% higher than our nearest neighbors. You look at Oregon and Washington, they're between 3 and 7% higher than their nearest neighbors. Again, not saying marijuana causes these accidents or it's a direct cause and effect, but again, it's something you have to start taking into consideration in fairness to look objectively at the issue.
Right. So now we look at the fact that Colorado is in full stride with this right now. So, and you have more clinics or dispensaries, distributing marijuana than fast food restaurants. Is that an appropriate statistic about parallel?
If you look at just based on mid-year 2017, when we take McDonald's and Starbucks, which we see ubiquitously when we travel around the country, and we looked at the number of medical and recreational dispensaries that we've got, we actually have more marijuana dispensaries than the number of Starbucks and McDonald's combined in the state of Colorado, based as of June of 17.
But it's still behind liquor stores, though, you mentioned as well, right?
Yeah,
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. It's about the same number, one for one, as pharmacies. But when you look at liquor stores, there's still more of those in the state.
Okay.
And when we hear the adage, let's treat it like alcohol, treat marijuana like alcohol, Maybe when it comes to regulation, taxation, there's things, comparables there. But what we have found is that the social acceptance of the drug has become so pervasive that it's almost become like an alcohol.
Right.
So if it's easy to get, there's no real perception of harm and social acceptance, use rates are going to go up.
But your applications for these hubs, so to speak, for lack of better choice words, because I don't even know if they're going to be called dispensaries 3 years from now. The amount of applications that have been applied for right now can certainly surpass the amount of liquor stores, though, right? Is that,
If they get so approved.
right? Because there's thousands of them that have been applied. That have applied. Is that correct?
Well, there's been numerous folks trying to get into the industry,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
because the profit potential is there.
Right.
Probably the biggest drawback with that is market saturation. There's
Right.
just so many of like businesses
Right.
that can be supported by population.
Right.
And the vast majority of our state, though, opted out of the marijuana.
Right.
So we're talking about 40% of our state is actually what's driving this that allows marijuana.
Interesting. So in closing, what do you think the audience left with today from not only your presentation, but from some of the others, such as Joe Mavaya?
Well, I think when we take a look at the message, I think some of the takeaways on this, when we look at the terms effective regulation, I think that's a misnomer. Because right now you've got 30 states, including the District of Columbia, with medical marijuana in place, and they're doing it 30 different ways. So there's no consistency in how it's being administered, what data is being tracked. There's no benchmarks in place to limit the THC production potency by this industry.
Right.
There's no harm reduction mechanisms in place in this.
Right.
You know, really, when we talk legalization, and this was one of the sidebar issues, when we talk legalization, we're really talking commercialization. And it's not so much about a product, not so much about the weed that God put on the plant. This is about potency. And we're seeing increased potency levels throughout the last few years because the public demand for greater potency products is what's driving this. And potency is driving profit.
Right.
That was one of the biggest takeaways.
Right. Well, thank you so much for
My pleasure.
coming. You did a fantastic job. Jim DePelisi with the Broward County Crime Commission and Dale Quigley, thank you for joining us.
Right. And Jim, I just plugged our website. If you go to HIDTA, HIDTA.NMI.org, you can find a lot of information there related back to what we've just talked about and much more.
Great. And BrowardCrime.org will also have some notes about the conference
Excellent.
as well. Thank you.